We have a special guest here this morning, someone who's going to pose as Oprah Winfrey. We thought that it was time to do an update on the interim process, and what better way than to have Oprah interview me? Oh, that's right, it's Mark. Which side do you want to be on? Okay. Yikes. This is scarier than Oprah.
And if you're wondering, yes, you all do get a car, all right? It's a Hot Wheel, it's 99 cents, but you get, no, I'm kidding. All right. So our first question, Pastor Jody, you have a passion and love for what you call the interim process, that period between the old pastor and the new pastor. And if you haven't thought about this, this is tough work. I remember her on her first Sunday telling me after church that she's fired the day she arrives in the interim role because there's already a deadline set on it, so it's tough work. How in the world did you fall in love with this type of work?
Well, I've always been someone who likes change, so, working in a setting where you get to promote that is a fun job for me in some ways. But really, I fell in love with it. Dan and I were without work for a time, and so we did the interim training. And my first church, and I won't say the name, but they decided that they would take a guinea pig on. And so I became their interim, and they coached me and supported me and moved me along and cajoled me, and I began to love this process. And I was with them for 2 years during the transition of 2 ministers.
Okay. I have to admit, about a year ago when we first heard that Sal was leaving, which, believe it or not, it's been a year this coming month, I thought to myself, we don't really need an interim minister. We got this. We got a lot of talented people, people who used to serve as full-time ministers. We got it. We don't need anyone from the outside to come in and tell us what to do or how to behave or things we need to improve. But when we interviewed you back in, I think it was March, the church council interviewed you, it became very apparent partway through the interview to me and I think to the rest of council that we did need an interim, that we did need this process. Now you've been here nearly 6 months. I'm totally putting you on the spot here. But why do you think we needed an interim minister?
Well, let me approach the answer to this question this way. What if for 10 years you never looked in the mirror? You. What if for 10 years you never stopped to consider, who am I? What is my life about? What am I doing?
This is a church full of people who don't look in the mirror. So I'm kidding.
Yeah. I know you're kidding. It's an example. It's an analogy. So you had a beloved minister for 10 years, right? Somebody who took you from a pretty tough time to a pretty glorious time, right? Churches that have a beloved minister like that are looking in their next minister for that same person. So Sal took you from 20 to 50 people up to 200 plus people. You need somebody who can take you from 200 to that next era of ministry. Now, that might be someone like Sal, but chances are it's not. Chances are it's someone with a whole different skill set. And so being able to explore, examine, assess who are you, who do we need to be in this next era of ministry, that's important work before you decide who should we call to do that ministry.
Looking back over these last 6 months, what are you most proud of that's been accomplished?
Nothing that I did. Seriously. I think the first, there are 4 things when you gave me this question that I thought of. First, that you appropriately grieved Sal, that you could say the amazing things that he had done with some concern about what's going to happen next. And now I hear, yeah, Sal was great, but we're looking forward to the next era of ministry. The second thing is you gathered an amazing group that's called the transition team. Those in the transition team who are here, would you raise your hands? Yeah. These folks are people who are helping me assess how do we move forward through each of the stages of the interim process. Third, you've also gathered all of your carers in the church to think about what are the ministries that we have, how do we implement them well, and what are the ministries that we need, and how do we grow them well. And then finally, I think you're starting to figure out that language of pastor size and program size church. You've heard me say it a lot. It happens in meetings. The idea being that when a church reaches about 100 members, one person can't fill all the roles necessary any longer. And so you need a different kind of pastor that's not going to be pastor-driven or pastor-focused or have their hands in everything, but someone who's more of an encourager and a cheerleader and someone used the analogy of conductor or a ship captain, where all the things that are going on, there's someone who pays attention to the vision, but doesn't necessarily have their hands in all the things.
What would you say are some of the lessons you've learned in working with us, the wonderful, beautiful, amazing people of Douglas UCC?
That you're wonderful,
Yes.
beautiful, and amazing. No, that is true. But what it does for me is it creates a moment of introspection. I realize that I don't need, nor do I have to know everything, because y'all are wise and experienced, and you have great gifts and skills. So I get to just be along on the journey, to be the prompter, to ask the questions. And you all are wise enough and smart enough to bring the answers.
Okay. Some of you may know this, some of you may not. When we originally called Jody to do the interim work, it was a 6-month call, which technically ends today, September 30th. We recently at council voted to extend that through the end of the year. What things in your mind do we still need to work on over these next few months?
Yeah. You've done really good work at capturing kind of the history. You remember the history timeline that was up on the wall for a while. We talked about identity, like where do we live? How many churches do we pass to get here? It's clear that you're a regional church, not just a local church. And then we talked about systems and structures. That's the conversation about pastor versus program size. We talked about connections. We're still in the process of capturing the churches that are in the community that you might be able to work with. The granting agency, the agencies that you've granted to that might be partners in terms of our ministry. The next step is the why. What is your why? So in your program, there's a mission statement. It's been there for a long time. I wonder if any of you know how old that mission statement is. When was that mission statement written? Any guesses? 2025. 2005. It's 25 years old. That's close. Yeah. I found a document this week that said that that mission statement was revised in 2009. So it's an old mission statement. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, when I read it, it's pretty accurate. But is it compelling? Is it inviting you to do something new, to move forward into the future? I would say if that's who you are, then it's pretty easy to just say, yeah, we're good. So the why question, I think, is the last piece. And by the way, Your transition team is working hard at figuring out what's the best way to ask that question, and I think within the next month you will see some invitation for you to participate in answering that question.
Okay. So last question today. If you were talking...
Wait a minute. Last question today?
Today, yes.
This is going to happen again?
Yes. If you have questions, send them her way. If you were talking to our next pastor, if he or she were here, what would you tell them?
I would say be very careful, because very quickly you will fall in love with these folks who are a beautiful, beloved community, who are offering an extravagant welcome in the world, and who are skilled and gifted. Amen.
Thank you. Liz.
Thank you.
So thanks, Jody. I know you have some more to share. I'm going to exit stage left, like Oprah does so well. Where's Dan? Dan, if you'd stand. Stan? We don't have any questions, I promise, just stand. I just want us to all, many of you have gotten to know Dan as well, and I just want all of us to pause and thank both of them for the good work that they've been doing over the last 6 months. So.
And make the pastor's supper. That was way more fun than me just regurgitating, right? Thank you, Mark. My reflection for this morning is short, I promise. Interestingly, that the Mark text about cutting stuff off is paired with the James text, which gives some more practical ways of thinking about what to do when things go awry or when you're in transition. So, not that we shouldn't think about cutting things off. I don't know how many of you read the cover article in the New York Times a couple Sundays ago, front page. A 96-year-old Gambian woman was arrested for continuing to do female genital mutilations illegally. This is still a thing. James has a different message about how we should behave when things go awry, when community is stuck or floundering. And he recommends 6 things that we can do. And so 15 seconds for each of those 6 things. Prayer, if that works for you. I think meditation is just as valuable. The idea is that in prayer we're connecting with the holy, with the divine. If the divine is within, then stopping, pausing, breathing is a good way to connect with the holy, with the divine within. Can be as simple as help me, or thank you, or a deep breath. Number 2, music. The benefits of music, singing, are many. In fact, I know for a fact that it's the reason why many of you are here, because of the singing and the music that Peter so skillfully shares with us. One article in Healthline magazine in 2020 by Wilson and Stanborough suggests that music connects and unites us. Think of the national anthem, protest songs, hymns in a worship service, love songs, lullabies. But it also activates learning, improves memory, addresses mental illness, regulates emotions, helps process feelings, aids in relaxing when there's critical illness, helps fight depression. They mention especially drumming, jazz, and classical music. Helps regulate the heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure. Decreases fatigue, boosts the effects of exercise, and helps manage pain. Geez, we should be singing all the time. One study found that Queen's "We Will Rock You," come on, y'all, you gotta be Queen fans here, right? Yeah. With its emphatic rhythm and strong melody, make it ideal for rehabilitation of speech and cognitive function. Number 3, touch. We know that babies without touch don't thrive. Massage therapy, for instance, reduces muscle tension, helps with sleep, lessens stress. Psychologists today are talking about, especially since COVID, are talking about skin hunger, PTSD, and other traumas can be helped with a touch. And touch must always be welcomed and appropriate, approved of for it to be appropriate. Number 4, confession. Coming clean, getting things out in the open, or simply saying what is so. Not just when you've done something wrong, but also when there's disagreement or there's something you need to share. Do you remember when you confessed to your beloved, "I love you"? That's an important confession. Number 5, connection to nature. Elijah in this text is critically sensitive to what's going on with the weather. There's a drought. He prays for rain. There's rain. Of course, you have to realize this was written after this happened, right? So the people connected Elijah's activity with the weather. Did you know that there's a challenge to Noah? What does that stand for again? It's the group that registers weather and watches weather around the world. I think it's such a great name. I can't ever remember what the letters stand for. Someone said it.
National Oceanography and Atmospheric.
Something. We got it. Thank you. Yeah. There's a challenge. It should be defunded. Not. Our connections to nature are important. Think about when you sit and watch a sunset. How inspiring is that? Or forest bathing, when you walk in the forest and that feeling that you have afterwards, that calm comfort. Or how about tree hugging? Just the connection with nature. I'm sure some of you think about working in your gardens or going for a swim, or what are the other ways that we connect with nature that remind us that we're grounded on this planet? In a USA Today article, "God Competes with Nature," a study by Baylor University is quoted. There's an overwhelming connection between access to nature and avoidance of church for nuns. N-O-N-E-S. People who don't want to go to church anymore. They find nature a better church than church. The researchers suggested in the article that nature is a personal, subjective, non-institutionalized, and unmediated experience with the sacred. I would say that we don't know yet that trees argue back when we go forest bathing. The value of being in community. Number 6, reconciliation or forgiveness. So coming to terms with broken relationships is healing. Family systems theorist Rob Voyle uses the visual of a lake. We all swim in a giant lake. And when relationships are broken, we imagine that the person in the relationship in which we're broken, that person is outside the lake. But what if we could bring the person back in the lake, but on the other lake shore? We're all part of the great collective, or part of God's love, or however you want to think about it. Nobody is outside of that because our relationships are broken. And so what does imagining that person coming just a little bit closer do to help you think about your relationship with them? By the way, when someone's drowning, we don't get too close because they pull us under, right? These are 6 ways, and they could each be nuanced in a sermon. James reminds us in his beloved book, faith without works is dead. These are acts of faith. Taking care of ourselves, being grounded, using the community to nurture and encourage our well-being. Sometimes the work is a deep spiritual practice as an individual within community. Amen? Amen.